Hello, everyone. Oh, gosh, how can I follow that? I was actually thinking maybe I could just sneak away and nobody would have noticed I've been here. I'm going to talk about finance in general, not just about crowdfunding, but I'll get onto that at the end, because I'm your local expert in crowdfunding. So catch me afterwards. I will be staying on for the Prosecco, even though I think there's going to be a world shortage of Prosecco soon, probably because of the amount we're going to be drinking later. So I am, if I got my thing, I call myself Crowdfund UK. I am Crowdfund UK. There's only me. Occasionally I get somebody saying, can one of your staff come and talk to us on? And I think, no, it's only me. And when you see those lovely pictures of Shanghai and Manchester and Singapore, I could have pictures of where I run my workshops. Cleckheaton, Newbiggin by the Sea, and Wigan. Because I've got a great job. I run my training on how to raise money through crowdfunding for the charities and the third sector. I'm a growth accelerator coach, and I raise money for startups and growth businesses through BAFI, which is that one there. So I've got a great time. Yesterday I was working with a social enterprise in Newcastle that does alternative and ethical finance. Today I'm talking to you, which is frightening. And tomorrow I'm working with charities and arts organisations wanting to crowdfund really exciting, innovative projects. What I'm going to talk to you now is finance and whether it's risky to raise money. And if it is risky, why? And in fact, I sort of nicked that slide that we've just had. Raising funding, do you need it? Can you get it in any other ways? Can you just bootstrap it? But what maybe holds people back is fear of failure, fear of going for it, and belief in yourselves. I think we're very good sometimes of imagining success when we go for funding. We've got to convince other people of doing that. Access to external finance, in other words, not friends, family, founders, and fools. Women don't get it, go for it as much as others, and male-led organisations. And that might be holding us back in growing our ideas into profitable businesses and our profitable businesses into great, big businesses. So why don't women go for external finance, whether that is bank loans, angel, VC, or alternative, as much as men? I'm just going to explore that very briefly. But starting off with us, well, not you, they're a different bunch. There was a survey of 1,000 national and international entrepreneurs. Interestingly, only 10% of those surveyed were women. And they returned role models or even real models back, and only 3% of those were women. And they're the big names you can think about. And they came right down on the list. And yet there's so many of us. There's now more women-led businesses than ever before. About 1 in 5 SMEs is headed by a woman. If we grew businesses as much as men, there would be a million more. However, is it the sectors we're in, that we're often in health, social work, small retail, that doesn't need that external finance? So maybe we don't need it. 44% of women often class their businesses as social enterprises, or they don't have access to share capital. Is that holding us back? Don't know, we'll look at that. So are women more risk averse? A lot of women say that it's access to finance that's holding them back from growing their businesses or starting up a business. That is what they say. And the perception is that women don't go for finance because they're not looking at risk, that they're worried about less risk. And yet women's businesses often deliver a higher return on investment than male-led businesses. So what is it that's stopping us? There's been a survey called Shattering the Stereotypes, it's well worth looking at, that it says that actually women aren't going for the same sort of growth mechanism that the men are here, the dot-commie, the Richard Bransonys, the Zuckerbergies, if that's a verb or a noun, I'm not really sure. But we're growing our businesses in sustainable ways, where we're reinvesting the profits, and we'd prefer to put our own money in than go for risky external finance where somebody has a hold over our business. Is that what it is? Is it because of the sectors we're in, as well as that growing in a sustainable way? How many of you, by the way, are in receipt of external finance that you want to admit? Okay. How many of you are thinking of going for external finance? Either loans, angel, VC, alternative finance? Okay. If you're interested, then come and talk to me afterwards. So, women and traditional, finance. If women perceive access to finance as being one of the most difficult things that's holding them back, is there reality in the fact that the banks won't look at them in the same way as they look at men? Certainly the perception of both women and men is that that is the case. But in fact, women tend to be more well prepared when they go to the banks. And if banks lend, which they're not doing so much, 52% of the women get the loan that they need and 55% of men. So we're not far behind. The Banking on Women report, funded by the government, found that there was no systematic discrimination in loans between men and women in their businesses and whether they got it. However, what puts women off in going to bank loans, according to this research, was the process, the speed, the transparency, rather than perception of discrimination. But they did cite being discouraged for going for loans. Interesting, I'll talk about some real discrimination now, because actually there are some things that put us going for VC and angel finance. A business advisor was writing an application for a business that I'm advising that has a woman CEO, and he was writing the business plan and refused to write her as the CEO and put her husband, who was the inventor, as the CEO. They're not working with her anymore. But when they asked him why, and he said, because if we present this, you won't get the money. That's ridiculous. But actually, there's been a couple of surveys that have been done recently. In 2014, there was a study in Harvard which played identical pitches. So the same words, same business, absolutely everything identical, from the slides to what the person said. The men reading it, as opposed to the women reading it, the men were 40% more likely to get the funding from the real angels there. Interestingly, and this is quite good for me, that the follow-up showed that attractive men were the most popular speakers, while pitches by attractive women were less popular than unattractive men or unattractive women. So that's quite an interesting one, that the prejudices against those of you in this audience that perceive and are really attractive. Another 2015 study by the University of California showed identical business plans to angel investors. Some had men as the CEOs, some had women, and that the ones that were written by women were much less likely to get funded. So there is a real perception and a truth behind it that it is more difficult when you're up against the angels and the VCs for that one pitch, showing the business plan, that you are going to get funded, which is astounding. But why? 12% of angel investors are women in the UK. There are more women millionaires under 40 than men. Yay! But actually, only 5% of those women invest in startups like themselves. So, if people back the people that are like them, which seems to be the research, and there are fewer women in the room, you are pitching to a whole load of men that aren't like you. And when you are pitching, you have very, very little time in getting your story across. So you're pitching something with an inbuilt bias against you to a group of people who aren't like you, who might not understand your business. So there is something really quite scary about going for it. The other thing is that women don't often work in the same networks as the angel investors and the VCs. And Candida Bush, chairman of entrepreneurship at Babson College, said that women are not in the network of venture capitalists, and VCs have got no incentive to look outside their group and don't have to work as hard when they stay with the same entrepreneurs and type of entrepreneurs over and over again. So the risk is pitching to people who are not like you and where you know that there's discrimination. So there is really a risk there, and what can you do about it? So a bit of alternative finance, which is where crowdfunding comes in. Doesn't matter if you can't read that. The blue is people who are aware of the various types of alternative finance, the new opportunities that are coming out post the banking crash. And the dark grey, or it's probably black here, are people who are unfamiliar with these opportunities. If you are unfamiliar with crowdfunding, crowd lending, trade finance, invoice discounting, pension-led finances, then it's much, much more riskier to go for it. What you can do is make yourself aware of these so you're removing risk. And alternative finance is growing massively in the UK. It's still a small proportion of the amount of money that goes into startup and growth businesses, but it is growing to 159%, etc. And where's Emma, whose husband runs a... Hello. House Crowd, an absolutely fantastic property crowdfunding platform that I've invested in. Growing massively, isn't it? Much more so than other businesses. The crowdfunding platforms, when they go for their own funding raise, are raising millions in days. So it's really going to be there. But there's the same gender imbalances. When there was a conference about alternative finance, and I thought, oh, alternative finance, you know, not men in suits. Who's going to be the faces of this alternative finance conference? Who's going to be the lineup? Another lot of men in suits, but they were smiling this time. So there are fewer women running crowdfunding platforms and crowd lending, and that's because they've all come through the banks, and the majority of the bankers, hedge fund managers who are getting out are all men, but there are women there. So I'm going to suggest now that actually it's less risky going for crowdfunding and crowd lending than it is for traditional angel or VC investment. And that is because if you go about the motivations of why people go for it, it's speed, it's much, much quicker to get it, it's building aware of your business, it's transparent, it's easier to get hold of sometimes, and you're in control. But actually, what's really good about it is that you do an online pitch or you do an anonymous pitch, so people can ask you questions. You're not there for just 10 minutes, if you're lucky, in front of a bunch of angel investors or VCs who don't get your business, who aren't like you, and have an inbuilt bias. You have more time in front of people because they can read your pitch, they can ask you questions, they can look at your business plan. Of course, there are fewer women funding through crowdfunding platforms, but there's many, many more than angel investors. So you have the ability there to put your business in front of people more like yourself, and to invest, if you like, in people like yourself. When it comes to donations and rewards model on Kickstarter, women do a lot better than men. And the research is, why are women doing better there than they are with angels? And partly it is because we know how to communicate. We've got good social networks which we can bring to bear, that we're realistic, we don't overvalue our businesses, we don't bullshit. That's a generalization. Maybe we do, but that's a perception. But certainly, and women back women in Kickstarter projects more than anything else. And women angels tend to back women-led organizations much more than men do. There are a few new products out there which are aimed by women angels at women entrepreneurs, just a few of them. Investing Women, the three down there are women angel-led funding platforms, well worth looking at, and that is a crowd donations reward platform purely for women entrepreneurs, but women are going through all the other platforms as well. And finally, it's about risk, isn't it, all of this? And what you don't know is much more risky than what you do know. So if you have an understanding of what the potential is for finance and how to go about it, it becomes much less of a risk. And therefore, you're much more likely to raise the funding. I have no idea whether that's, I'm assuming it's within time. So thanks very much. I'm staying on. I'm going to help get rid of the Prosecco that we have. Please, if you'd like to talk to me, then I'll be very pleased to chat and exchange the business cards, which of course I did over the break. Thank you.